He's at the city council meeting, I think. Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Township Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, May 8th. And Mr. Massey, would you lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I will ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Discussion?
Yes.
Could we add just a section, an item on here to kind of give an update on where we are with any recent developments with Parks and Rec? I mean, there was a meeting a few days ago, and we'd just like to see if anyone attended that and what happened at the meeting.
Yeah, let's see.
That was supposed to be an executive session.
Yep, we're going to have
For
an executive-
Thursday night, Mr. Chair.
We're going to have an executive session, but I would like for the public benefit to get updated on kind of what's been happening in terms of the meetings that Mr. Lehman has had, Mr. Atkins, myself, over the course of the last several weeks. But we will be having an executive session to talk about a few things on Thursday. So why don't we put it under future positioning? I guess that would be a good place.
Do you want it on Thursday's agenda or tonight's agenda?
I was thinking tonight's agenda.
Thursday we'll,
Huh?
and then Thursday we'll recap it.
Yeah.
So we'll make it right under future position.
It's not, this is the agenda you're approving.
Right. Okay.
So it would be on top of that one.
Yeah, let's see. You're right. Well, right after public comment, we'll discuss that.
Okay.
The answer, and then we'll go on to reviewing Thursday's agenda.
Oh, after public comment? Okay.
Okay. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we'll ask if there's any public comment, and seeing none, we will move on. And we'll bring it back up here. And so just to talk briefly about the Parks and Rec and what our status has been on that before we go into Thursday's agenda. We've had several meetings. Mr. Lehman has had several anyways. I've attended one or two, but Mr. Lehman, are you prepared to just kind of give a rough outline of kind of where things have been since the last meeting?
Sure. Just so the board knows, I have had several meetings, including with Brad Hester, the chairman of the Parks and Rec Commission, the current and outgoing interim director, Jamie Weasel. That led to quite a bit of conversations, ended up having a meeting scheduled with the school superintendent, Clarence Garner, in attendance, the City of Grand Blanc mayor and city manager, the Parks and Rec Commission chair, Brad Hester and Jamie Weasel, and myself over at the school. Talked a lot about the current situation we find ourselves in with Jamie departing. Friday will be his last day. It really brought up, a consideration of we find ourselves in an emergency situation. We basically have two people running Parks and Recreation now, and that's the recreation programmer and the office manager. As you guys are already aware, we had some concerns about liability, both in financial operations and in human resources. Those were discussed at length. I've tried to share our concerns across the board with everybody. I did make a proposal, and to date it is the only proposal that has been presented to try to help us through the crisis that we find ourselves in. I believe that the focus should be on making sure that we maintain our programming for the residents of the community. And unfortunately, the proposal that I made while we met in our group with the school, city, and township was tentatively and reluctantly agreed to have the township take over financial operations and personnel operations we had Attorney Laddie write out into motions what that would require of the Parks and Rec Commission. And the proposal was basically this. The commission would make a motion to transfer financial operations to the township. We would put those financial operations and treat them like a business fund or a separate special revenue fund. Put the revenues and expenses, run it through there so that it would be a standalone fund, not commingled with township funds at that point. Operate out of separate accounts. And we will do the same thing with personnel, bring that all in-house, but that means we would have the ability to make financial decisions, obviously, as everyone here is well aware. We find ourselves somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 in arrears and accounts payable for the Parks and Rec Commission currently, let alone the shortage in personnel that needs to take place to move forward. At the Parks and Rec Commission, I've attended 3 special meetings that they've called. Trustee Adkins presented our proposal. It was handed out to them, and Attorney Laddie and I attended to answer questions. They took no action on that Thursday night. On this past Monday night, Trustee Adkins made those formal motions, and they were rejected by the Parks and Rec Commission. So unfortunately, as it stands right now, we have a Parks and Rec Commission that is teetering on the brink of financial ruin. We still have our concerns about human resources. If anyone had been in attendance and watched what took place by the Parks and Rec Commission, it really highlighted my concerns are ongoing that they lack the expertise in personnel and human resource issues that is really required to protect all 3 entities in this joint venture. Instead, what they've done is they've agreed to meet once a week. I'm not sure what that will accomplish. This week they appointed the office manager to the interim director's position, but they still have basically 2 people that are running the operations that required 5 people up until today. So I still have some very serious concerns. That's why I've been working with both our Labor Council and with Municipal Council, Mr. Laddie. It's why we're going to ask for consideration of an executive session on Thursday, because I think we're in a position where we need direction from the board, and you're probably going to have to make some decisions on how we move forward. I don't believe there is an option to do nothing, and that's what I've shared with the school and city and Parks and Rec Commission at this point. I think if we do nothing, it's the same as watching the demise of all of our program in Parks and Recreation. So we want to explore all those options. We want to vet our concerns. We want to talk about potentially some audits that need to take place, maybe payroll audits, and really so that we know where we stand, what kind of liabilities we may face from the recent past, and we've got to take some actions to protect ourselves from this day moving forward. And it would appear, I wish I could explain why the Parks and Rec Commission seems to feel that it's the township versus everybody. But you already know the city feels that way. It's the township versus everybody. And I think the Parks and Rec Commission has been led to believe the same thing. And it was a good faith effort to take over the 2 areas that they've actually exercised no control in over the last 50 years, but suddenly they're terrified that the township would exercise control in those areas. So I think you guys have some decisions to make tomorrow and to provide us some direction moving forward. And I wish I had better news, but I feel like we're at a critical juncture that we're about to see Parks and Rec cease to exist if something doesn't happen.
There's something I want to clarify too, Mr. Limita, that I think, Mr. Limita has been getting some abuse in terms of, I want to say that we haven't been pointing the finger anywhere, but I'm hearing that there's some fingers being pointed at us, and specifically Mr. Limita, and this is not the Township Board wanting to take on another responsibility. It already is our responsibility, and we're exercising good judgment, and I think the issues that Mr. Limita touched on, we can go much deeper, but the liability concerns that we have would prevent me from discussing those here openly. But I think when you have both our municipal attorney, our labor attorney, we have our insurance company, we've got financial concern. We bailed them out last year, and yet we're finding ourselves, you know, significantly in the hole already at the start of this year. We've got HR concerns, we've got governance issues. I mean, the board meeting that I attended, or their commission meeting that I attended, what was it, earlier this week, Monday, I guess, they weren't sure who had the right to make what decision. So I'm not even sure they really have a handle on the governance. At one point, they, you know, when Mr. Adkins presented what our proposal was, they said that they did not, or the chair said that he didn't, Mr. Hester said that he didn't believe that they had the authority to allow us to take over the finance or the operation. But yet I find out that the city's now, you know, working on taking over the finances. So I don't know if it's okay for the city to do that and not us. The city was able to pull its parks out of the agreement several years ago, and I don't remember them coming to the township to ask permission, so evidently that's allowed, but us taking over operations of day-to-day and the financial isn't allowed. So I'm mystified by the governance of that board and what they allow and what they don't. But the bottom line is, you're right, Mr. Limita. To do nothing is for this board to basically be in malfeasance of our positions. I think if we don't act, we're not acting in good judgment. And there's some, I mean, we had some concerns several months ago when this first came up, but those concerns have only become deeper and wider as we explore things.
So just a follow-up, Superintendent Lehman, I certainly would support very strongly a payroll audit. What that you mentioned earlier, I think that that's a prudent thing for us to do. And I don't really want to be flip about it, but I understand that there's 11 or 12 different accounts that the Parks and Rec have, and they don't seem to have any of the money that they need from those accounts to tide them over. It's a question. It's just a question.
You know, and I think that's what we want to look at too. I mean, again, I don't have any control or seeing it, but I've been told by the office manager there's 12 bank accounts. I don't know why there's 12. I couldn't begin to answer that question. For an operation the size of Parks and Recreation, if they were to come in here, we would bring that down to 1. But I think that it's just one of those cases where we don't know what we don't know yet. The stuff I know right now is enough to cause me concern about the liability that we're exposed to. What I don't know causes me even greater concern, and we won't know until we get the results from an audit to take a look at payroll practices, as long as we have records. Mm-hmm. And then I think once we know, we can deal with it. We can make quick decisions about making sure that we do the right thing for people who may have been harmed previously, and then set the policies in place to make sure it's clean moving forward. In the absence of being able to do that in its current configuration, my recommendation will be different to this board.
Yeah, and what's amazing is they've had clean audits, and I'm not sure who's directing those audits, but I'm talking about directing it, either board or their staff directed, or I'm not sure, but that's unbelievable. Mr. Massey and then Ms. Lane.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
How many board members does the Parks and Rec Commission has?
7.
7?
2 from the city, 2 from the schools, 2 from us, and 1
at large.
So if you divided it up mathematically and make an assumption, so our adversaries have 2 bank accounts each.
Well, I'm not sure, but yeah, 12 bank accounts. Yeah. I'm not quite sure why that's needed. Ms. Lane?
My question is, with Jamie Weasel leaving the end of this month, and I know we've said
End of this week.
end of the week. I understand.
Thanks.
Thank you. My question is, at some point, I believe Parks and Rec Commission were told not to go out and look for a director, or to put the search for a director on hold and not do any hiring.
They were told that, but that was by Director Kay Edson, who told them that it wasn't by the township or any other of the entities.
All right. So, because they do need a director that's qualified, that has certainly more experience, we're losing tons of years of experience in contacts. Can we somehow direct the Parks and Rec under the current agreement, which we have not solidified, to go ahead and post and put out for statewide like we did before for a director?
I did give them the recommendation to keep the ad running when they pulled it, because I couldn't understand why you would pull the ad knowing you needed to fill the director's position regardless. The only thing that we'd asked them to do was to take input from the township board, the city council, and the school board in what those three bodies were looking for in the next director. That was the only advice we gave them. They took that and said, we're going to pull the ad, we're not going to run it. I also asked if they would use the human resource professionals from the three governmental entities to oversee and develop the process, because I already had some concerns about HR.
I'm not sure they're prepared to even hire anybody at this point. I think they've got, yes, Mr. Thomas.
And I'm not prepared to even to advise this board to give them the authority to hire somebody. I think if we're taking them under as employees of the township, that would be up to our operational manager to hire, and I don't want to see an ad run.
Well,
The superintendent, but that was my 2 cents. But Superintendent Lemina, did you have you contacted the folks for the actuarials
for Parks and Rec?
for the OPEB? Do we? I mean, isn't that a 6 month process?
No, I don't think it'd be a 6 month process, but we haven't, and I can tell you that in review of the contractual obligations that currently exist, there are 2 contracts that talk about retiree health care, one for the director, Kay Edson, one for assistant director, Jamie Weasel. They also, one of those accounts has, I'm told, $90,000 in it, and that account was dedicated to retiree health care. The contracts read that that account is dedicated, that's where the money's coming from for the commission to pay for that health care for as long as there's money in that account. It doesn't talk about who's obligated to make the payments once that account is empty. It also says if the Parks and Rec Commission is no more, if it comes to its end, then all that happens is the money that's in that account, it's specified in Director Edson's contract, I think it was like 55.7% of those funds go to Director Edson, and the remainder would have gone to Assistant Director Jamie Weasel. But I don't believe he would qualify for those funds, because in order to be qualified, you needed to have 25 years in and hit age 55 or 60, whatever it said in their contracts. And I've got one copy of Kay's contract that's signed. I do not have a signed copy from Jamie Weasel's. And
the thing with the, I'm sorry, but the thing with the contracts is that you keep this in the back of your mind, that until I pushed, none of them had a contract. Kay signed her contract 4 days before she announced her retirement.
4 days after.
4 days after. I knew there was 4 days. So she signed her first contract for 30 years, 4 days after she said she was going to retire. Secondly, Jamie, Director Weasel, never has the contract, but it was never approved by the Parks and Rec Commission. It was never signed by him. So I don't know if that's going to be semantics, because I think in a court of law, I don't think it's really going to matter. But there is, I believe it's in the strategic plan, and that's where, or the employee handbook, one of the two where I read it, where it actually spells out what the commission is responsible for retiree health care with the benefit package for the dental and vision, and also the prescriptions. And I can dig through my stuff if you don't have it.
Well,
I don't have any other information in the contract, and if it's just in the contract, then then the OPEB obligations die with the demise of the commission, and the only OPEB obligations you have are that account with $90,000 in it.
Would it be appropriate if we emailed through you, Scott, to Superintendent Lehman? Would it be appropriate for us to email questions and concerns that we can discuss tomorrow in executive session?
I think
Is that appropriate?
one of the things we're going to talk about, I would hope, is the discussion of the audit. And I already have a phone call in to start that process to look at what we need to do to arrange to have an audit so that we know what our liabilities are from payroll and personnel.
I think if anybody has additional questions, you can forward those to Mr. Laddie, is what I would recommend to, is forward any
David,
questions.
not Dennis? David, not-
Or Dennis and myself, but I would make sure David is the point of contact for those questions.
Because his would be,
Yeah, and we
That's
don't want
appropriate
his
it
would
to
be
do that.
confidential.
We don't want it to be the whole board.
confidential.
No, I know, but we can do that, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, I have something I would like for the board to clear up. Clerk Lane said that the way we are proceeding, we're losing a lot of expertise. That's what you said, right? So I'd like for somebody on this board to explain to me, how can you be, and let me use my own calculation, because we haven't had the audit yet, okay? How can you be $100,000 in the red? What kind of expertise is that?
It takes
Listen-
a long time to figure that, to lose that kind of money, I know.
Okay, so I'm saying you haven't lost any expertise because they're taking you down the tubes. So what kind of expertise did we have at the beginning? I don't think we had much of nothing.
Well, before we go down that, I think, I think one of the things we want to do, let me just draw some comparisons, with the fire department, we hired MGT to come in and give us some objective information that we could stand on. And even though we've got very objective documentation of what we feel are claims of that are very open to liability for the township, I think we want to get some documented information. We'll get that if we do a payroll audit, and there's some other things that we're going to talk about. But I think we want to document these things, and then we can, we'll put it out there, and if people want to point fingers, that's up to them. But for us, for our own sake, for liability reasons, I don't really want us to do any finger pointing at this point in terms of any staff or board or anybody else. But as far as losing expertise or what have you, I think we right now I think we're in a fact-finding mode, and I'm not too worried about the loss of expertise as much as I am of getting the ship on the right track, and seeing if we can bring some greater expertise to the table. Ms. Lane?
I want, really good expertise going forward. But when I talk about expertise, and we're looking at almost 50 years of a Parks and Rec program that started in 1970, the community at large and in Genesee County would say we've had an excellent group of programs that have developed, have been productive for the community, the children in this area. The financial things have come to light within the last year or so. So the expertise I'm referring to is the wonderful parks that we have, the programs that have been developed and been successful, the tournaments that they've had out there. So
Well, we certainly want that.
so that's
continue.
what I was referring to as far as expertise, because we don't have anybody there with any knowledge on how to develop or run all of these programs that are going to, I've already sponsored 2 teams and we haven't even
Well-
started playing. So, I've been more committed to Parks and Rec than anybody on this board and what it does for the community. So that's what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't mean to step anybody's toes, but I think they do have a couple of capable people there. I beg to differ. I believe that the two people that are there running it right now are very capable, and I think they've been doing it.
Yeah.
I just think that they're probably going to be overwhelmed with the shortage of staff. And the other thing is, one of the things I think that Mr. Limita and this board is, and our department heads have been, and even with the hiring of our department heads, we've been focused on raising the bar as far as how we operate as a township. And what happened, in the past with different departments or whatever, who knows? But we know that Mr. Limita and this board is focused on hiring department heads and running departments in the most professional manner. We don't want to just compare ourselves to the local area. We're comparing ourselves statewide and nationwide. And when it comes to Parks and Rec, we're gonna do the same thing if we're running things. Mr. Thomas?
It's something that seems like it's our mantra, and I know that you don't. We found an issue. It's been an issue for 10, 15 years, not the last year, the 10, 15 years. It's been going down this road. We know that there's a problem. Let's just fix it. And the problems all occur because of lack of communication, then lack of writing things down and having a firm commitment and a firm agreement instead of the handshake deals. And I know that everyone on this board is done with the handshake deals. Right, Trustee Massey?
Yes.
So, and I'm very, 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 very excited about the change. And I don't want to look back at we learned from our mistakes in the past, and let's move on and let's just fix this. Treat it as another issue, like the fire department, like other things we run into. And I think we do have we have very, very good programs in the Parks and Rec, and we have two really, really, really outstanding employees out there right now as directors. Our maintenance guys are the most caring individuals I've ever seen they love the parks and they work 7 days a week they're very, very committed. Our program director, Sanja, is very committed. Our business person, Carol, I take an affront to what you said, Kathy, I'm sorry. But I just would like to ask one quick question. Supervisor Bennett, you said that people are pointing fingers at Superintendent Limita?
I'm just, this is not a power.
It's not.
This is clearing up issues, and if anybody is saying that, they're wrong. The fire department, we offered the city services. They decided to go their own route. Parks and Rec, we put a proposal out there several times now that we want to keep the programming in place. We want to keep the great things, but we want to take over the issues that our attorneys and everybody else that are professionals are telling us there's great concern. So this is not about this board, me, Mr. Limita, anybody. It's hey, you know what, we're open right here. I mean, we don't have any other meeting beside what's right here in front of the camera. And what you're seeing is that we have genuine concern. And that's what we're acting on. It isn't because somebody needs a job or we want to appoint somebody. It's our genuine concern. Mr. Massey?
I'd like to clear up something that you said. It could be easily misunderstood. When you said past mistakes.
Not ours, I'm sorry.
Well, I'd like for you to clear that up.
Not our mistakes, because we brought this to the forefront from the first 2 weeks. And when we say, and I just want to remind you too that I was the chairman of the fundraising arm that raised $350,000 to build the pavilion out at Bicentennial Park and the handicap accessible out there. I'm the one that did that. So when you said, Kathy, that you have more invested than anybody else on this board, every one of us loves our community and loves our park. And I wouldn't say that about any of us.
Yeah,
but when I said the past, I'm talking past boards, not this board, because we brought this to the forefront the first month we were installed.
I think
Thank
we're
you,
probably up to
Mr.
speed now on,
Yes.
I don't know, anything else, Mr. Lima, that we want to add on Parks and Rec? And, I mean, we're going to go into executive session on Thursday and talk about contract, what have you.
The only thing I would add, as long as the board stays focused on the continuity of programming, I mean, we have a fantastic Parks and Recreation program. We serve so many different individuals in all age groups, and right now we've got some commitments through the summer. We have to get through the summer and make sure those programs are pulled off. I think we're prepared to do whatever it takes to make that happen. We just need a little cooperation from our joint partners.
Well, apparently they don't share the same concerns with the liability, and so we're going to have to discuss where we go with that. But first thing, we're going to do some more fact finding and document those things. Okay, with that, let's go to the Thursday agenda. And we're going to approve the minutes. In our consent agenda, we have some financial information. We've got the treasurer's report for activity. It looks like grand total of about $1,616,000, $976.72. So hopefully everybody will have a chance to look through financial activity recap. We'll also in the consent agenda approve the annual budget for the DDA, which is pretty basic until we get things fleshed out a little bit more. Mr. Lehman, any comment on that?
The annual budget was approved by the DDA board, and now it comes to you guys to approve. Although it showed revenue of $276,407, we think that the property taxes, that's what we'll collect from the summer property taxes from two entities that we'd be collecting money from then for the DDA. And the $200,000 would be the proceeds from the loan that Blanc Township Board authorized. They don't necessarily need to take the entire $200,000. In fact, my recommendation is that they only take as much as they need so that the DDA is not paying the interest. But we put it in there because it has the potential. We put it in as a revenue. They may or may not take all of that. And then the expenses are limited to, we know that the engineering was just under $10,000. We've got RFPs that went out now for the marketing, which we're looking probably between $10,000 and $15,000 depending. It's a pretty basic budget. It was designed to be that. We've got an attorney hired, and then it just depends on what the DDA goes. But I would be surprised if they needed to take that entire $200,000 in as revenue.
Okay.
Just a quick question. You mentioned $276,000, I think, as potential revenue for the DDA. When would the cash actually be available for them?
So the summer tax bill that goes out for July, those proceeds come in. That's when that first cash influx from a DDA capture, the TIF capture, would start to come in. And it's what goes out on the summer tax bill, Treasurer Guzak, maybe it's like Mott Community College and
Schools.
one other
Schools.
entity that would go out in the
Yeah, some
summer.
of the schools around there too.
And so we capture from two taxing jurisdictions. That would be the real cash that comes in, that $76,000. And then I said the $200,000 is really just the authorized loan. They take what they need when they need it.
So it would be in the September timeframe, basically, that they would actually have.
They would have
funds
the
available.
cash
Some of it.
influx.
They won't get all of it, but
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to, unless anybody has any other questions on that. Okay, under operational issues, the board will consider resolution to install a street light at the intersection of Dorr Highway and the Township Campus Service Drive. Information in your packet. I don't know, Mr. Sears, any comment or any questions from Mr. Sears on that one?
I have a question, Mr. Sears.
Okay.
Bring me up to speed here. I've lost some knowledge here.
Sure.
I need your knowledge base to help me out. The
Absolutely.
light that you have in mind of installing, what will be the distance that light will reflect?
Oh, that's
A square area?
It's a
square
very
feet?
difficult question, because that all has to do with how high it is on the pole, and there's a lot of variables on that. The goal is to illuminate the entire intersection.
Okay.
That's what I communicated to consumers. That's their goal too, hopefully. So,
Okay.
That's about all I can tell you, unfortunately.
Yeah, I understand that.
Mr. Guzak?
It's gonna look just like the poles that are across the street on every pole, right?
Absolutely.
Because it stretches out almost.
Yep,
you
it's on
know.
an arm that goes over the road.
Right, okay.
Okay. And then we're also going to install one at the corner of Hill Road and Grove Street,
Correct,
which is another intersection.
correct. There were some safety concerns at that intersection from pedestrians, and I've had a lot of calls from other people that, so it warranted the $100 to just get it done.
Which it's at an intersection, so
Right.
it isn't like
Correct.
we're just putting it up.
Right.
Ms. Lane?
When I saw these on the agenda, I was wondering if there'd be a way that you could request a street light at the center entrance on Dort Highway between the traffic signal and where the trucks enter Heritage Park. Because their decorative lights are set back, and so when you're coming south, you can't see that boulevard entrance to go into Heritage
Sure.
Park. So I really think we need one there, and I've mentioned it numerous times, so with that being on the topic, I would
We can
suggest
look
that.
into that. I can tell you that would be a little bit more of an expensive project because the infrastructure's all underground there. And there's no existing utility poles.
Yeah.
The only reason this is gonna be so cheap is because the infrastructure's there already. But it's something that I can request and get the cost on and present that to the board and we can move forward with.
Well, one of the things that I thought was that if the gas station at Sam's Club was going to happen, it would open up the PUD,
The only one that cares about lights.
and that maybe we would ask them to put some additional lighting, but
Sure.
we're still waiting for that to move forward. We haven't heard anything from them, so.
Haven't heard from him in a while.
Okay, so these two, anybody have any questions for Mr. Sears on those?
No.
Okay, and it looks like the next item or two are for you too, right, or the next one anyways, is that the board will consider a motion to approve a quote from Zito Construction for $34,440 for water infrastructure work in connection to the Hill Road Rehabilitation Project, and authorize Township Superintendent to execute all related contracts and documents.
So this work, it came about unfortunately at the pre-construction meeting for Hill Road, which didn't give me a whole lot of time to plan for it. It wasn't identified during any of the design phase of Hill Road, which we have quite a bit of involvement in my department because we have to identify all of our infrastructure. We have to send the road commission and MDOT the plans, their engineers, so that they can really plan to not interfere with our stuff or make adjustments when necessary. A couple of these hydrants are gonna, one of them is going to be in a driveway if we leave it, one is going to be very close to the roadway. And then while we're there, there are a couple valves in the entrance to Speedway that have to do with our well house back in Knollwood, or the Knollwood well house, which is back in Concord Green, that are right now in smaller boxes that we would like get put in manholes so we can access the valves, so we can maintain them without having to dig everything up. Now's the time to do it while those driveways are dug out. Some of this we have to do, we don't have a choice. So Zito Construction is the contractor on site. We solicited the bid from them simply because they could do it while they're right there. We're gonna save money on mobilization, and we weren't afforded a whole lot of time to search out a lot of contractors here. I can answer any questions you might have about that. Yes, Mr. Massey?
When you said mobilization, are you referring to the distance that other contractors would have to travel?
Whenever we have a project like this, we pay a certain amount of the contract for them to actually get their equipment there, get their people there. We would be paying for barricades, lane closures. There's a certain amount of cost to actually mobilize them from their site to the job site.
Okay.
They're already there. Their equipment's already there. The lane's already closed.
Yes.
We're saving money on the barrels and everything else. And Zito, they do the majority of our work anyhow, so very trustworthy.
We don't want the road work held up because.
We don't,
have-
no, and they're pretty close to that part of the project, so.
Yeah.
We did communicate that we weren't real happy with the timeline, but there's just some things we can't control, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sears. The board will consider a motion to approve an initial budget of $100,000 for renovations to Fire Station 2 and number 3 to accommodate full-time firefighters and authorize the Township Superintendent to approve and execute quotes and estimates. Mr. Limita?
So this comes about, and Jeff did update the document to reflect $120,000, and that really has to do with as the bids are coming in. For obvious reasons, we have a very short window here to accomplish the renovations that we need to make to this building and Fire Station number 2 to accommodate them, this being the band station for the community moving forward. Not that it can't be done, and we were very swift. We had Debbie Honay as an architect to come in. She was familiar with the building, had done work here before. She had a set of plans. She was able to come in and walk through with us, give us a really quick turnaround time on the architectural renderings of what we need to accomplish. In the meantime, Director Sears had already started seeking RFQs for some of the other work, like the garage doors, the HVAC. So it's a very fluid thing, but we don't have the ability to go out for the traditional 30-day RFP closed bid kind of process because we're trying to accomplish the work from start to finish in 60 days. So we're really looking for contractors, A, who have a reputation that can do the work, B, can do the work right now, not 90 days from now, because we do have to have it completed no later than July 25th. That's where this came about. Jeff and I had the conversation, and it became, can we ask the board, and we can still bring them in. If it hits the time frame, we will bring them for the board's approval during the regularly scheduled meetings every couple of weeks. But our concern is that if it exceeds my spending authority, if I have to wait 2 weeks to get the approval to grant the award, we will not make our 60-day time frame to get the work accomplished.
Yeah, I understand that completely, and in fact, I encourage Mr. Limita to move forward on getting going on some of these things because we can't afford to wait.
I think Mr. Trustee Massey had his...
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Massey.
I have a question for the superintendent. Do you think $100,000 is sufficient?
You'll see the one in front of you guys at your stations tonight. We revised it to $120,000. We did that based on the cost estimates that we've gotten in to date on some of the RFQs. But there's still some that have, like the general renovations, I think was more of a solid number, but I think, Mr. Sears, you still had some question marks on some of them that you don't have bids in on yet.
Correct.
And there's some issues. I walked through it with Mr. Limita and a few others, and you know, the bones are there. It just needs some better dressing on the things. But there are some things even wrong with a few of the bones. You know, the drainage inside the where the trucks are parked and a few other things. But
So,
Mr. President,
yeah, Bennett, I actually had three points on this one. First, understand the need to move quickly here, but I would like to make sure that we have a transparent bid process that we use for this. So if there's some single sourcing that we need to do, we ought to have some solid rationale for that. Second, I'd like to, continue to make my plea every chance we get here to use local sources wherever it's possible for these. And the third is, in the body of the updated memo here, it talks about some of the insufficiencies of the fire station being bathing sleeping quarters. And so I didn't see in this listing on the second page anything related to shower locker facilities. Is that somewhere in here that isn't clear to me, or is that something we ought to
and
build
one
in?
thing too, maybe also is, Mr. Limita, if after we wrap up the board meeting, would it be possible for the board members to have a walkthrough?
That'd be great.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So after
There's
our
showers
meeting,
there.
maybe if you'd
There's
like,
showers.
we can walk through the facility and we can show you where everything will be located.
There are existing showers in the fire station in the current bathrooms that are going to be renovated.
Okay.
And then there's an existing locker room here in Township Hall used by DPW technicians.
Is it convenient to the rest of the?
It's here it's actually right here behind the boardroom. So it's in this building. It's not immediately accessible from the fire station, but there's ways they can get in here if they need to. And there's more than enough room in there if they need lockers to store anything for the time being. It's not being fully used right now, so my technicians would have to give up a little bit of space, but that's fine. Very few of them use it anyhow. So.
And Jeff, maybe just talk like the showers that we're going to reno out there are kind of the containment showers. They come in, they want to get, I mean, they're really used mostly for getting rinsed off to get coming back from fighting a fire. And I'm sure Chief Burdette can also talk about it. Because of the incidence of cancer that's associated with firefighters, some of the practices that are in place now are about what they do with clothing and their turnout gear when they come back, and how they need to get that stuff cleaned off, washed off, and so those showers that you'll see when we take that tour are more containment showers, and we do have other lockers and showers in the facility inside of here.
And some of it, from what I've learned from Chief, is like isolating some of those areas so that you're not, breathing that, that on an ongoing basis.
The biggest items that we have the shortest time frame on right now is the HVAC system. That probably has a few week time frame on it anyhow, once it's ordered. And then just the pure renovations of doing the flooring and building whatever walls, doing any kind of demolition, that stuff is going to take time for any contractor to mobilize here. So we're just trying to act as quickly as possible so that, I mean, my goal is the fire department to be able to start moving in here at the end of June if possible, if they need to, so that we have a whole month that they can coordinate that. That would be very nice. I don't know if we're going to make it at this point, but we're going to try.
Well, and I appreciate, moving in here early or getting it ready early, because there's inevitably, there might be something that we've left out or something that may take a little bit longer than we planned.
There's always contingencies.
Right.
And you're bringing my washer and dryer back here, right? Because if you leave that at the city, I'll be really, really bummed. Seeing that I'm the only one that cares about the fire department, so, because I donated that washer. Got it.
All right, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Mr. Sears. With that, the next item on the agenda will be the board will consider a motion to adopt the revised 2019 DPW fee schedule, which is effective immediately. Would you like to comment, Mr. Sears?
So I'm requesting to make a small change to our fee schedule to add a deposit that was overlooked at the beginning of the year because we weren't thinking about swimming pools in January and December. So we've had an issue the past couple of years. There's a lot of people that might be on a well in the township that, or in close proximity to a fire hydrant, where they have to fill a new swimming pool quickly so that the liners don't shrink before water gets in there. And they'll come and they'll get a hydrant meter from us and use a fire hydrant if it's in close proximity to their home. And we've had a couple instances where we've had to chase down the invoices for the actual water. We require a deposit for the hydrant meter itself because it's a very expensive piece of equipment to replace. And if that's stolen, then we have a check from them that we can immediately cash and recoup that cost. But the water is something that we've kind of never really thought about, I guess, and it's kind of a difficult process to get that put on taxes. So what we'd like to do is add it into the fee schedule where we can request that they give us a separate check for $250, which we will cash immediately upon receipt. And then if there's anything left over from how much water they use to fill their pool, we will refund that. If there's anything more over, which we don't see very often, it would have to be a really big pool to get over $250. Then we can seek out those monies. But this really protects the township and the water department, and I think it's a good step for us. It'll avoid a lot of problems at the end of the summer.
Any concerns? I think it's prudent.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think at this point, I think we've run through everything.
I'll just take a tour of them.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
One point first, I'd like to thank the board and staff for their condolences with their family's loss. So very much appreciated, and thank you for carrying on. Okay? All right. Mr. Mansour, your motion again? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
to adjourn meeting?
I'll support.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll take a tour.
Take a tour.
Let's take a tour, man.